quickly start off with the Jets, and we were just playing some of these comments from Rick Bowness about the availability of Nikolaj Ehlers.
So, Rick, would you consider, did he have a setback, or is this just kind of...
We're very, very cautious with it, but if he shows up and he still feels it, then we got to get this thing fixed. So one way or the other, if it's more time off, then it's more time off.
I know different teams handle injuries and information differently. At the start, he was out there, then it was 17 minutes, he was off, he missed a few practices, he was back in a non-contact jersey on the weekend or heading into the weekend, everything seemed fine. And now he's not playing tonight, has basically been ruled out already for Thursday. I mean, what do you make of this? And maybe more importantly, how much of a setback is this for a team that put so much importance on Nikolaj Ehlers, and as we've just talked about, playing with a new center in a new position, not really the ideal way to get ready for prime time next Wednesday in Calgary.
Well, isn't it starting to feel a lot like the start of the 2022-23 season, right? When it looked like Nikolaj Ehlers was okay at the beginning, and then I don't know if it was misdiagnosed or just not handled accordingly or properly, or they were still trying to rule things out, but then he was all of a sudden out and didn't come back for quite some time with the hernia. So to me, it's I think of in these situations, particularly in this situation, I kind of feel bad for Nikolaj Ehlers, just because this is a guy he wears his heart on his sleeve. He's a guy who's not afraid to go into the corners. So you can't, not that you necessarily go towards whether it's a toughness issue with injuries, but there are injuries out there that some players are willing to play through, other players aren't. I don't put him in a category as a guy that's, isn't willing to play through pain or isn't willing to go through, it needs to be necessarily 100%. I just see this as bad luck. And I mean, this is a time of the season, particularly this time of the season with preseason. And yes, these are important weeks, of course, to find chemistry with new line mates, to just get ready for the season, dust off some of that rust from a long off season and essentially, to be cliche, hit the ground running for when things really matter. But that's kind of the point here, is that things don't really matter, until that first regular season game against Calgary. And with a player like Nikolaj Ehlers, to what you were saying, Huss, I mean, he is going to be such a big piece of the puzzle. He has been such a big piece of the puzzle. And I'd add even more, with the uncertainty maybe around Mark Scheifele and his future, obviously with Pierre-Luc Dubois and his offense going out the door, he was going to be relied on even more, and particularly on special teams as well. So this isn't good news for the Jets. It isn't good news for Nikolaj Ehlers, but I still very much take the wait and see approach. I don't think it's one of those things that's necessarily going to be going to keep him out for a lengthy amount of time. And you still do feel like, especially out of some of the interviews, they're not all good news, obviously, but you feel, and mostly bad news, but you do get the sense that they're being precautionary and making sure that they're not pushing it for these games just to get him into a preseason game. The last thing you'd want is for him to re-injure himself or make the injury worse. So I still do very much take a wait and see approach with this, but just with everything we've seen with Nikolaj Ehlers over the past few seasons, and specifically last season, this isn't good news for the start of a new campaign for him.
Well, for sure. And I mean, he's going to be so linked to Cole Perfetti right now, who's had his fair share of injury issues in the past. But, with the exception of that cheap shot hit that knocked him out of that Calgary game and gave him a one-day reprieve from training camp, he has been there. And, it's going to be a big adjustment, a big challenge for Cole. And, I wonder maybe if this gives him more rope at the beginning of the season. The bottom line is, for Rick Bowness, he wants this team to be ready to go and playing to their potential right out of the gate. He doesn't want this to be glorified preseason where you're just getting to know your line mates, and not an easy spot for Cole to be in, because as I just mentioned with Michael, I mean, there's a lot riding on Cole Perfetti. I mean, he is unbelievably important. They need that line to, to be productive and to, achieve what they think that they're capable of right now. And as we've been kind of talking about, not the greatest way to build chemistry and confidence in a group if they can't get into any game action.
Well, to your point, it would be curious to know just how much of Nikolaj Ehlers' availability on that wing plays into whether, the confidence that Rick Bowness has of Cole Perfetti playing down the middle, because we know that there's always the potential for a Cole Perfetti to pop up to that top line, drop a Gabriel, Velarde down to the second line potentially. You have Nemestikov, who's also played second line center for this team in the past. I mean, there are some options, but Cole Perfetti and taking that next step as a centerman, like the time is now, right? I mean, this is, he's gone through obviously some seasons filled with injuries. He comes back, has a great off season, feeling stronger. He had that, I guess you can call it a minor step back with the cheap shot in preseason. But it's good news that he's healthy. But is that confidence level that I mentioned with Bowness, is that, where is that if he doesn't have, a driver, a puck carrier like a, Nikolaj Ehlers, who can gain the offensive zone, as good as anybody in the NHL, and how much that factors into again, that confidence he has in Cole Perfetti playing down the middle. That being said, I mean, again, it's not good. The season is coming up, fastly approaching. It's not good news that Nikolaj Ehlers is ruled out for the preseason, but the focus right now might just be to get him ready for that regular season. And I don't think he needs a lot of time with Cole Perfetti per se. I know it's a bit of a new position from him, but hockey's still very much hockey, and they can learn that on the fly. It's just the issue with Nikolaj Ehlers being in and out of the lineup, while it potentially has that ripple effect for a guy like Cole Perfetti, I think it has a ripple effect for the entire forward line, because the way it's constructed right now, you really like the top three lines and how they're the makeup of them and the potential of them to be three potentially scoring lines, or at least have that third line with Iafallo bring some offensive touch to it, especially if Adam Lowry can regain some of that touch he had in the second half of the season. And then you had a fourth line that was, a pretty good grinding line that could be relied on. I'm not saying that necessarily taking out a Nikolaj Ehlers completely throws that in flux, but it does, I think, take away from that vision that Bowness has for his game day start, and hopefully what will grow to be this team's ultimate game day roster. But again, I think it's a little premature. Obviously, it's worrisome, but that's what happens when you're talking about the player with as much influence and in that lineup into this team's success as a Nikolaj Ehlers does, for sure.